My basic background with the Salvation Army has been mainly in the Southern Territory over quite a number of years now. So I've been a cluster leader with Salvation Army officers for around 11 years. And I was an active teacher in the LAMP program for quite a long time, doing a range of things in the areas of church life and church health and wellbeing. So as Kim shared with you, my main interest is in the area of what kind of processes and skills and developments really enable pastors to be in a good, healthy space. So I'm going to just share with you a few thoughts today on this area of resilience and along your theme of how things work in terms of following in the dust of the master Rabbi. What does it mean when the road gets a little tough on that area? Just let me start with a biblical reflection for just a moment, and then I'll dive into a few reflections on resilience. Just like to read to you a verse out of Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 1, and it just dovetails in with some of the things that Rick was sharing around the area of calling. So reading out one of the slightly older versions, because it's just the way that it crafts this verse is significant. So Paul says, as a prisoner, and that's his adversity, that's his challenge. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I call you, or I encourage you, come alongside you, I call alongside you to walk in a way that is worthy of the calling that you have received, or the calling that you have been called with. And in actual fact, the word calling appears 3 times in the one verse. Sounds terrible in English, but what we do in the Greek is it's all there, echoed 3 times. And so Paul says here, in the midst of my adversity, in the midst of my struggle, I want to encourage you to walk in a way that is worthy of the calling that God has on your life. And so I'd love us to think about that as we reflect on walking before God in the context of the tough going, particularly around COVID at the moment. My wife and I are bushwalkers. That's what we do for relaxation. So when we hit the mountains, often we actually enjoy walking off track, working out how you cross a river or get through a really sticky bit of brush, or just when the going gets tough, you've got to actually stop and think about what steps do we take to look after ourselves and just make sure that we can make it through to the end of this walk together. So I'd like to reflect with you about the need for resilience, particularly at the moment. Now, I'm going to, I just noticed my screen come on and off there. I'll try just sharing my content through my screen here, and just let's see if we can make this work. So here comes the PowerPoint. That's working for you all. And I will just reflect on a few things together here. So first of all, what is resilience? Can everybody just give me a wave? You can see that. Just making sure
just letting you know we can. Yep.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Great. One of the things I think we're all aware of in ministry is our need for self-care. And self-care is the thing that takes us through the ordinary ups and downs, the ordinary challenges, the ordinary thrills and spills of ministry. So all of us have had to put self-care practices in place. We need them right throughout our time of ministry, through the ups and downs. That's not the same as resilience. Resilience is a unique set of skills and capacities and resources that we need when a specific adversity strikes. And so I'd like you to reflect on this for a moment, but resilience is what we call adversity specific. And so it's not the same set of skills that applies in every kind of adversity. There are different adversities that impact us. They have different aspects, different elements. Here in Australia, we are pretty well aware of the kind of things that come our way naturally: bushfires, floods, droughts. You might remember even Banjo Patterson had a poem, I think it's called "Said Han Rahan." You know, when after the bushfires have come, then there'll be droughts, and then there'll be floods. We get used to dealing with those kinds of adversities, and they're things that we know, things that we prepare for. But resilience is needed, and it's a specific combination of things that tunes itself to a specific adversity. So let me just give you a quick example. If you take a block of rubber and you put it in a vise and squash it right up, it's going to deform and it'll change shape. Take the vice off and the pressure off, the rubber will return to its same place. And so we say that has the physical qualities of resilience. So it bounces back to its former shape after the pressure is taken off. If you take your grandmother's Royal Doulton teapot and put it in the same vice, squash it up, it's probably going to end up in about 16 pieces on your workshop floor. It's not going to return to the same shape when the pressure is removed and taken off. So we would say that's actually not a particularly resilient object. However, if you take the same block of rubber and put it in my pizza oven out the back door here and wind it up to 500 degrees, you're going to have a stinking, horrible mess on the floor of the pizza oven. You'll never want to cook in that thing ever again. And the block of rubber will not survive. Take your grandmother's Royal Doulton teapot, which is probably fired in a ceramic furnace at something like, I don't know, 1,000 degrees or something they fire ceramics at. The teapot will survive the adversity of heat where the block of rubber won't. And so adversities are different and resilience is different. So an object can be resilient in one context and not in another. Same with human beings. We can be resilient in certain circumstances. We may be able to put up with certain physical challenges and be quite resilient when it comes to, a long distance walk or something like that. But tell the same person they've just been diagnosed with cancer, and they might find it very difficult to be resilient in that circumstance. So one of the things to learn here is resilience needs to be tuned to the adversity that we face. So let's just have a think about how adversities arrive to us. There are some significant differences, and just have a think about the impact of COVID on us in relation to some of these. So adversities vary in the amount or the nature of the damage that they do, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, the loss of life that might be there, the speed at which they unfold. So a bushfire might arrive very, very quickly without much warning. A flood might come quickly after a significant rain event. So we may get little capacity to anticipate. A diagnosis of cancer might give all kinds of warning signs before it arrives. And so there can be different speeds that they impact. The length of time under the adversity be there. A bushfire coming through, maybe only hours before it's gone and it's finished. And we are then experiencing the aftermath and the cleanup of that situation. COVID has been unique in the length of time that we are experiencing the adversity. In fact, for those of you in New South Wales at the moment, you're back under a very significant adversity. Once again, we're not clear just at this point in time just how that's going to unfold. It's the breadth of the crisis that also matters. So if you've got an individual diagnosis of cancer, and I've got a close friend at the moment who's got a serious diagnosis of cancer, and I'm one of her support people. As I ring up and chat and talk with her, I'm not under the adversity. I'm able to support her who is. The number of people in your system that are experiencing the same adversity impacts things significantly. So if you're surrounded by people who are also under adversity, their capacity to offer you support is significantly limited. And one of the features of COVID at the moment is everybody's in this together. We're under significant pressure collectively. What do we know about events of this nature? Is there any history here? So again, even though bushfires are increasing in their severity in Australia, we know quite a bit about what they are, how they work, their impact on us. We didn't know much about COVID. No one had lived much through an experience of a major pandemic in our society. Those in Southeast Asia had a little more idea after their experience with SARS as to what to expect. But in most of the Western world, we had very little idea of what to expect. And just understanding the impact of the long-term changes involved. What's the aftermath of this going to look like? These are all elements that change that adversity. So some of the unique features of COVID, and Kim just outlined this, VUCA is a little acronym that's been put together by a number of futurists a few years ago. I think that all sat in the background. No one paid much attention to it until last year when we experienced one of these major VUCA events, and people began to understand just the impact of this combination of four things when they interact together. So volatility are a whole bunch of rapid changes that take place that are difficult to anticipate. Uncertainty, so many elements of the situation that are unknown. In fact, we don't know what we don't know around this. Complexity, there's lots of areas that are being impacted at once, and all the simple cause and effect, if we fix this, it'll fix the situation, just don't work. And so simple cause and effect thinking just unravel in times of serious complexity. And finally, ambiguity, they're just competing issues in here, things that are hard to make sense of, values that we need to keep the economy going. We need to look after the well-being and the safety of people. We need to keep people's mental health in good spaces. How do we look after all of this collectively together? It's just not clear what is right and what is good to do in all of these circumstances. So this is a significant adversity that affects us. What I'd love to do now is just quickly walk you through 10 things that need to be fine-tuned into a response to COVID. I'd love you just to jot these down. I'm happy to give you the copy of the PowerPoint afterwards that can be sent out to people, so no need to take all the notes down. But if you'd like to reflect on these 10, we'll pop you in some breakout rooms at the end of this, and I'd love you to think about maybe 2 of these that you particularly feel you have a strength in, that you've been able to apply this significantly to your dealing with COVID, and maybe pick out 2 that you feel, boy, if I was to improve my resilience, these would be the 2 that I would work on. So which are the ones that you draw on most strongly? Which are the ones that you'd love to work on a little more? Absolutely key for all of us who are Christians is our relationship with God. And so it's how we draw in to our personal relationship with God in prayer, in some of the spiritual disciplines, particularly when the pressure comes on, becomes important. I would have talked to dozens and dozens of pastors over the last 12 months who have actually found that COVID has been a spiritually enriching experience. They've actually moved into new disciplines of prayer, new ways of exploring reading the scriptures, new ways of connecting with God that they never did before. Even some, walking the neighbourhood, praying for families, for houses around the neighbourhood as people have wandered and done things. Just changing the way that the patterns work, particularly with extended times at home, and not as much movement, not as much travel, has given rise to different things. I need to share, for me personally, this has been quite a significant element. So my wife and I have started reading the scriptures together in ways that we hadn't done before, and we continue that right through. So just allowing that adversity to draw us nearer to God is a really important aspect. There's some very good research out there now that people of faith are more resilient in the context of adversity than people who lack a faith. In fact, that's so significant in the research that the Australian military and the US military have both now instituted processes called spirituality in the military. How are we going to increase levels of trust and faith in our own soldiers? Number 2, and this is the other really big one here, is drawing on supportive relationships. So who are you able to reach out to connect with? Again, some of the things that people have shared with me over this whole experience, particularly of a second lockdown, has been the value of just connecting with 3 or 4 other people on a fairly regular basis, even by Zoom. And these are sometimes people interstate, internationally, that people have connected with just to pray with and talk with, who are not going through the same things that people are going with in your own locality. So you can just draw on a level of support just slightly outside your own system for this. I've been staggered at the number of even Australian pastors who've said, look, I've just connected with the 2 or 3 people that I met overseas. I did a trip and to Israel, caught up with a few people from a different background, a church. I've connected with these people, and now COVID is a time when they're going through it hard in the UK or in the US. I've been able to reach out to them, and now that we're doing it a bit tougher, they've been able to reach out to me. And so just having those supportive relationships has been really critical. Sometimes that's with professionals, sometimes it's with family members, with peers, with friends. Just having that cluster of connections becomes really important. And in a time when most of us are way over Zoom, we've got Zoom fatigue, just finding a space where we can actually just intentionally connect for a period of time, appreciate and value that, and then let it go becomes really important. Number 3, and this is just working out what external resources do we need here. Is there accurate information? We'll talk a bit more about this in a moment. Do we need a little bit more education around managing things? Some better processes, some skills in place. Often in times of adversity, it's drawing on external things. So both my wife and I have done little online courses that have just helped us just skill up in a couple of key areas that has just given us that little bit of an edge of being able to cope a little better with situations. Sometimes it's drawing on financial resources. Sometimes it's drawing on equipment. The number of people in ministry that have drawn on the expertise technologically of their grandchildren and their sons and daughters in ministry has just been staggering for me. I don't know how many grandkids I've seen on Zoom, guiding their grandparents into Zoom meetings and things like that. Just drawing on those resources becomes a really important element. Never be afraid in the moments of adversity to reach out for help from others, because it's one of their capacity to ask for it and to receive it becomes really important. Self-awareness. It's critically important for all of us that we become aware of what's happening for us emotionally, and then work out what do we need to do to tend that, to look after it, and maybe even at times to regulate it. People are sharing with me right around the country at the moment significant increase in fatigue and exhaustion, significant increase in anxiety. In this last lockdown, a significant increase in anger directed at other people and areas like that, significant levels of discouragement. And so just being able to name those things and then work out what do I need to do here to respond and regulate and deal with my own emotions in these areas becomes really important. It's critical of not letting the adversity catch us out where we're unaware of the impact of those things. A couple of mental processes are really important. One is an area we call situational realism, and that's being realistic about what we are currently facing, getting accurate, good quality information, not overwhelmed with too much information, but just knowing exactly what we need to know to make the decisions as leaders we need to make. It disciplines our reflection and our understanding to actual facts and observations, and avoids that danger of catastrophizing the situation or of minimising the situation. And most of us are part of Christian communities now that have got all kinds of little conspiracy theories running around the place and stuff on social media, and we're having to manage people's reactions and responses to lots of misinformation around that. So finding a accurate source, being a little bit clear as leaders in keeping people focused on what we would call situational realism is important in here. And then alongside of that, before God, cultivating what we would call a positive challenge mentality. And this is where we come back to that verse that Paul places before us in Ephesians 4, where he says, I want to encourage you. I want to come alongside you and invite you to trust and have faith in God, to walk faithfully before God, be a person of hope. So this is not uninformed or, optimism that is ill-informed. It's actually an appropriate scriptural biblical hope that is really important in these moments. Many people observe that in the prisoner of war camps in the First and Second World Wars, the first people to pass away were the optimists, those who had an unrealistic optimism. But those who had a genuine, deep hope were the ones that lasted. And that's not the same as optimism. It's got a depth to it that's a willingness to be able to last the distance, but also appreciating that this is a challenge that we need to be able to rise to. we all need some flexibility and creativity. When the pressure comes onto something, you've got to work out how far can this bend before it breaks. And we need to know what things in our lives, what practices, what elements that we have can bend, can change, and still be what they are, and when do they go too far and they break. And so we've just got to work those things out. What things just need to stop, need to be dropped, what new things need to be shifted in here, and learning how to be flexible on those things. It's important to hold the core values of something. When COVID impacts us and adversity comes, we're forced to drop a whole bunch of things. We need to ask the question, what's the value inherent in the practices that we've dropped, and how can we take that value out of that practice and reinvest it in something new so that we're able to have continuity of the value that's important to us, even though the actual process or practice itself may need to be dropped. One of the things we know about adversity is that people who have a structured and planned approach to living actually survive better in difficult situations of adversity. This is my challenge area, to be honest with you. I'm not a particularly structured person, and so I've had to learn what steps can I put in place, what's a rhythm that can help me focus in times when there's lots of chaos and disorganisation around. So the capacity to organise, to prioritise, actually enables resilience. So the structure and the rhythm that sits there behind a life, particularly when the normal rhythms that define us get lost, becomes really important. And a lot of people would have reflected in the whole period of COVID that one of the things they've found so important has been just putting some basic rhythms back in that just gives some shape to their life through this period. And the final one here is it's an old-fashioned idea, but this is the idea of just a little bit of old-fashioned toughness. It's back in fashion again now. We call it grit, and it's the capacity just to endure and persevere. We now know that this can be trained. We can actually learn to have a little bit more toughness, a little bit more grit when it comes to pushing through something. So it can be learned, it can be developed, it can grow for each of us. So that's the 10. I'll stop sharing my screen now, turn the screen share off, and just let you reflect for a moment. In groups, which of those 10 would be the ones that you would feel like these are the ones that I am pretty good on? I've got myself in a pretty good place around these. And which of those, if you were to pick 2 or 3 of those, would be the ones that would be your learning areas, your ones that you could actually develop a little more to develop a little bit more capacity for resilience, particularly around this process. And we're thinking here of just the capacity to continue to push through when the time is tough in this moment where we're still in a situation of volatility, of complexity, of uncertainty, and of ambiguity. We don't know a whole lot of things about how this is all going to unfold and resolve. We're all hopeful around the future, but we're still in the midst of adversity at this point. And so encouraging one another in the calling that God's placed before us, working with one another of this becomes increasingly important. I'm going to finish there, and let's go to some breakout rooms or some questions, whatever we'd like to do. Kim and Nicola at this point.